Findlay, Ohio, a small town in the heart of America. Paperboy John Lucas makes his early morning rounds. But Lucas is not an ordinary employee of the Findlay Courier. He was recently voted America's #1 paperboy, the best and most reliable in the country. He gets 10 cents per newspaper delivered, but paperboys like Lucas may soon disappear from our streets. With the recession in the US in full swing, there are now only 1,200 daily titles, a shocking drop from the 7,500 in print during better times. The competition with online papers is making it increasingly difficult for new titles to establish themselves, as the young spearhead a trend for catching the news online.
Well, when you have an email account, most of the news is right there when you sign into your email, so it's pretty much hard to ignore. So, I mean, it pretty much beats the newspaper when you have to pay for it, and then it's right there, you at home.
It's over. I used to subscribe to the Boston Globe, but then, it just got a little bit expensive, and if everything's online, then why bother?
Newspaper and online, but more online actually.
The figures are dramatic, and the migration of readers to the internet cannot be stopped, says Tom Rosenstyle. He's the head of the Pew Center for Excellence in Journalism.
The economic foundation of newspapers has collapsed, and that's happened for two reasons. First, newspapers have lost half of all of their classified advertising revenue to internet websites that are not subsidizing journalism. And the second thing that's happened is that roughly half the audience has moved from newspapers in print to newspapers online.
For decades, newspapers were gold dust for investors. Annual returns of over 20% were the norm. The New York Times in Manhattan showed how a strong self-image can lead to survival. But most major publishers have failed to adjust to the developments of the last 5 years.
They weren't reinvesting any of that into innovation. And so part of what we're seeing here is rapidly changing technology buffeting an industry that was so profitable and so easily made money that it wasn't prepared to change.
The effects are not only felt in the bank accounts of the owners. For 24 years, Gary Metzger was an editor at the Los Angeles Times. Last month, he got a call from his boss to say he was no longer needed. He may still have his Pulitzer Prize, but no job to depend upon, and he knows the reason.
There are too many young people now who are just, have dived in headfirst into the world of the internet. They're either blogging, they have their Facebook page, they have their MySpace page, they're going on to YouTube, they're sharing videos, they're sharing blogs, they're sharing diaries. They're, the young students nowadays are really, really into the internet.
The potential savings of an internet edition compared to a printed newspaper are enormous. No press, no ink, no paper, no staff, and a simple click in place of a rapid transport service. But this is also the root of the problem. Internet readers are, at least today, in no way prepared to pay for an online newspaper. And a newspaper that earns no money cannot pay journalists. This will have an inevitable effect on the quality of journalism offered, says Nick Davis, one of Europe's leading media critics.
Once the owners of news organizations say the primary object of this organization is to make money, inevitably you damage the quality of the news that's being produced. And that is what has secretly, silently been going on in our newsrooms across the developed world for the last 30 or 40 years.
This is Politico.com, whose offices are based in Washington. The journalists working here, and there are at least 60 of them, write primarily for networks and offer completely niche journalism. Politics in and around Washington is their only theme.
And certainly places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, I think those places are still going to be around because I think they can specialize in certain areas within a broader publication. But I think people that don't give you anything new, that don't give you anything that you don't already know from the television news the night before, I think those are the ones that are going to have problems.
The business model at Politico is that if they have a good story, major media houses will want to link to that story. This generates web traffic for their site as well as advertising costs. And yet, no real money is being made through the internet yet. The free newsletter, which is released 4 to 5 times a week, is still financed through sponsors on the site.
Because we're a specialty publication, we've done very well with certain kinds of advertising in our print product, advocacy advertising, that kind of advertising. And online, we're like everybody else. We're still trying to find the exact magic solution to that.
Back in Findlay, Ohio, there are very different concerns. The town's river has burst its banks for the 6th time in a year. For the Findlay Courier, with its circulation of 35,000, this is the hot topic. Whilst the owner admits that internet news is a consideration, this competition hasn't proved life-threatening for papers in rural areas.
Correct. I would make the observation that smaller papers are less impacted by both the recession and perhaps the internet. So the metropolitan ones are the ones that are really on the ropes. And we've got our own challenges, but they're not as severe.
One such challenge has already hit the Findlay Courier. Papers increasingly have to use the same sources, rather than sending their own reporters to all events. The chief editor of the newspaper was an employee of the news agency Associated Press for 25 years before he moved to the Findlay Courier.
I see a bright future for the wire service, the agencies, as you put it. But there's also a bright future for local news. People still want to know what's happening in their area. So yes, they'll always want to know what's happening in Washington and overseas. But we give them something, as you've heard from elsewhere, that no one else can give them, and that's coverage of Hancock County and Findlay, our area, of everything that happens.
John Lucas no longer works for the Findlay Courier. Autumn arrives and he heads off for college, set to study international relations. Whether the paper he leaves will be used as a valuable source of information or fish wrapping, nobody knows. But one thing is for certain. 4 years at the paper has given him enough money to finance the first year of his studies.